And I just wanted to touch very quickly on the meeting that took place in Copenhagen with EU leaders bringing themselves together to discuss the future of European defense and how they're going to go about dealing with all of these things. Now, it was a special European Council, which is usually something that happens fairly infrequently because it has to be based around something else. And with all of the stories of drones in Denmark, in Sweden, in Germany, the tanker being captured over in France off the coast of Nantes, if I'm not wrong, the council members suspecting a lot of this to be Russian incursions into European territory and provocations, and combined with the fact that the Russians have threatened Europe and Putin has said outright that he would consider retaliation against any continued support of Ukraine, it came at the right time. And the big thing that came from the Copenhagen meeting this week was really that EU leaders discussed what's going on with Ukraine. They discussed the ways in which they're bolstering European defense, particularly with this famous drone wall, I should say, that they're talking about to block these Russian incursions and to prevent any further provocations coming from Russia. Now, what is this? Is the question that a lot of people have been asking. What is the point of having a drone wall? And really, the point of this is that the European forces and NATO itself don't have the funding, they don't have the industrial capacity right now to be producing all of these extremely expensive missiles, more missile systems, more air defense systems, more equipment and materiel for their fighter jets. And they can't continue to expend these very expensive munitions and the expensive fuel for these, well, not drones, but these fighter jets and these helicopters to be able to be countering every single incursion taking place. So rather than doing this, as Poland did this week when they shut down some Russian drones that had invaded Polish airspace, they have decided to start building up this so-called drone wall. And the plan behind this is that they take these very inexpensive drones. I think you can see some that are built for as low as, I think, $50 I've seen in some cases, with some very simplistic systems and equipping of these drones. And the goal of this would be to spend a few million euros to build up this effective tsunami of these drones that would be able to then counteract these incursions, blow them up in midair, block them. And I think one example that I've seen, and sorry, I got my details wrong on the military drones. Rather than spending 1 million euros to build a missile that would take down a drone that costs 10,000, why not just create military drones that cost 10,000 euros to take down drones that cost 10,000 euros? You're saving money. It's more effective right now. Drones have shown that they are the most powerful tool in the Ukrainian war right now, and I should say the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so this is why the European Union right now, with the SAFE funding, with the SAFE loans, with the military boost that's happening right now, this is why the Europeans are actively pushing hard for this tool. Now, is this going to happen? We don't know. The European Union has been making lots of proposals. There have been a lot of discussions. There's been a lot of argumentation regarding how you actually use this European funding and the SAFE funding to actually build things. I think the most famous joke that we're seeing going around right now is that the Italians spent a good chunk of their SAFE loan, or they received a good chunk of their SAFE loan to build a bridge down in Sicily. And while they claim that it was military infrastructure, the reality is that it's a bridge between the south of Italy and the southern island of Italy, Sicily. And it's going to be used by a Ford Focus, not by a Leopard 2 tank. So aside from that, what was announced during the Copenhagen summit was that the European Union is continuing to stand by, despite the provocations by Donald Trump and his friends, Ukraine's right to self-defense, to find an a fair end to this agreement and a fair peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia that doesn't just involve Ukraine capitulating, and also a continuation of the support for Ukraine. They highlighted the 30.6 billion euros that's going to be provided to Ukraine in 2025, with 12.5 billion being for the Ukraine facility and 18.1 being from the G7's Extraordinary Revenue Acceleration Loan. And on top of that, they continued pushing on the sanctions against Russia. Now, we know that Donald Trump has continued to say, I'll do this in 30 days, I'll do this in 2 weeks, I'll do this in 90 days, nya, nya, nya. And despite the fact that Trump seems genuinely scared of continuing to apply these sanctions, he continues to be scared of actually punishing Russia. The reality is that the Europeans have to. It's the main way to support Ukraine right now. It's the main way to limit future aggressions by Russia. And to be honest, it's the right thing to do. We cannot reward an imperialist invasion by a country that continues to invade its neighbors and continue to trade with them normally. And the Europeans also outlined, or re-outlined, I should say, their principles for a peace negotiation. And this comes down to 5 key points. Firstly, that there can be no negotiations on Ukraine without Ukraine. Secondly, there can be no negotiations that affect European security without Europe's involvement. Third, any truce or ceasefire can only take place as part of a process leading to a comprehensive peace agreement. Fourth, that any peace agreement needs to be accompanied by robust and credible security guarantees for Ukraine that contribute to deterring future Russian aggression. And finally, that peace must respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Now, these seem very basic, but they're very important because of the fact that they not only rebuff this attempt by American governments, or the American government right now, to negotiate around Ukraine and try to force them, but also that it prevents or outlines the need to prevent any situation that actually weakens the European security environment without having involved the Europeans in this situation here. And this was combined by a reiteration of the European position on security guarantees for Ukraine. In that, for there to be peace through strength for Ukraine, Ukraine needs to be in the strongest possible position at any point from here on out. Now, this includes, according to this readout, that the member states would increase their readiness to step up their efforts in delivering air defense systems, munitions, and missiles, training equipment for Ukrainian brigades, and helping to develop the Ukrainian defense industry and integrate it further into the European defense industry. And this is particularly important because it's also going to form the backbone of European security as we go. I mean, we need to build up our industries. We need to keep building up factories. We need to build more of everything. We need more munitions, weapons, tanks, jeeps, convoys, air systems, naval ships. We need more of everything. And a big part of this is a geopolitical gambit on the part of the Europeans that, aside from supporting Ukraine because it's the right thing to do and we have to support our allies, it's about also understanding that Ukraine will be a major military power on the continent. It will be eventually a major military power within the European Union. And it will be a major contributor to the future of European strategic autonomy. And look, a European Union that has military powerhouses like Ukraine, France, Poland, and Germany de facto becomes a global power. We become one of the biggest producers of equipment. We become one of the strongest military groupings. We become a grouping of nations that have some of the most powerful militaries in the world. And it's just It's a necessity. It's a necessity for strategic autonomy, it's a necessity for the future of the European Union, and it's a necessity for the future of our goals. And the final major point I'm going to point out here before I run off for one of my many, many long ISM meetings is that the European Union also announced its need to increase defense readiness. More necessary procedures being put through in a more effective way, faster mobilization, better financing. And a big part of this was, highlighting the benefits of the 150 billion in defense loans that came through the SAFE program, uh, activating the national escape clause that's found within the Stability and Growth Pact to allow the member states to increase the defense spending massively at a nation by nation level. Also, pushing for the EIB, the European Investment Bank, plans to increase its support for European security and defense industries by funding and providing more loans. Now, this is the biggest complaint we always see about Europe, that we don't mobilize our funding fast enough, that we don't have enough funding compared to the Americans, the Chinese, and the Russians, and that we're simply not putting our money where our mouth is. But as we're seeing more and more, as we're seeing these systems and these defense industries building up and more jobs being created, and most importantly for member states, more tax receipts being put through, it's always a very, very positive step. It shows that we're actually taking this seriously and that, as I'm always saying whenever I'm speaking to Dave Keating or, to be honest, at this point, whoever, the fact that we're actually starting to come through on this ground, that we're actually coming through on the long-term goals of European defense funding and defense structure development, the more we're going to see these structures coming forwards. I mean, it would be nice if we could get a unified investment structure in Europe where a lot of us could start investing more into these ourselves, or that companies could invest more into these themselves, but we'll see how this goes. However, there was one point, or a couple of points, on what the council meeting called for from other institutions. Now, they called on the Commission to explore further measures to facilitate defense spending, to propose additional funding sources for defense at an EU level, including possibilities for investments in funding programs that already exist outside of SAFE, that they need to consider measures that will mobilize private financing faster, and also that the EIB should urgently adapt its practices for lending to the European defense industry and reevaluate the lists of excluded activities and increase the volume of available funding. Now, due to a lot of the green funding, a lot of the green investment efforts, and a lot of these structures here, we know that a lot of these companies were slightly less keen to provide loans for defense because it's one, didn't fall under any green structures, two, was seen negatively by the public and a lot of investors themselves who don't want to be seen as being involved in shady military and violent activity. And on top of that, it was seen as a very risky deal because you don't necessarily always get a return on your investments when you are investing in defense or security structures or in environments. Now, I think at this stage, when we've got an imperial actor on our frontiers trying to poke us, threatening us, and also just invading our neighbors and our allies, we tend to care a little less about the more normative things and we start thinking more about how do we avoid being invaded and shot. Now, I know this is very surprising for many people because they, as I learned very recently, some people genuinely think that, if we're just nice to the Russians, they're not going to be very mean to us. But I think we've seen that that's not the case. We've seen that a lot of people on the far left and the far right who believe that are slightly intellectually unhinged, be nice. And on top of that, it's just a bit dumb. But the final thing that the council called for was for the three major institutions, the Commission, the Council, and the Parliament, pardon me, to advance their work on simplifying the legal and the administrative framework around defense-specific industries, funding, and deployment. And this is part of the EU's general omnibus structure, where the EU continues to work to simplify things, remove some red tape, and try to bolster its dynamism when it comes to its competitive industries and even its less competitive industries. Now, for now, those are the big things for this week that came out in Europe. I'm going to try to do this on a weekly basis. Let me know if you enjoy this. It'll be quick and dirty, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes at a push. But let me know if you guys enjoy this. Let me know if you guys are curious to see more of this kind of content. And let me know if you'd like me to turn this into a weekly or a monthly Q&A, because I'd like to do more, say, audience-facing work that allows me to actually interact with you guys a lot more than I get the chance to using just chats, which I think is a bit useless right now. And also the weekly dispatch where we engage a bit, but we don't necessarily have the conversations we would like to do. And of course, if some of you are out here and you're experts in your field and you actually want to come and have a chat with me on the French Dispatch, then you can always let me know. But guys, thanks for checking in on this quick weekly updates. And yeah, see you guys next week.